A well-dressed black woman is asked to leave a fancy restaurant, even with a reservation. But everything changes when her husband arrives in a luxury Porsche. They suddenly regret their actions. Maya stood at Le Cristal's entrance, reflections multiplying across mirrored walls. Crystal chandeliers cast light across her face as she approached the hostess. Her silk blazer fit perfectly, an investment from her now comfortable life. "Good evening," Maya said with practiced confidence. "I have a reservation under Richardson." Elise, the hostess, glanced up with a practiced smile that faltered momentarily as she assessed Maya. Her gaze lingered a beat too long before dropping to the reservation book. "Richardson," she repeated, running a manicured finger down the page. "I don't see anything under that name. Are you certain it was for tonight?" Maya felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the sensation that had accompanied her throughout. Her journey from her working-class neighborhood to the elite art world she now navigated daily. "Yes, I'm certain. My husband made it last week. James Richardson, party of 2, 7:30. Elise turned a page, her movements deliberately slow. "I'm terribly sorry, but there seems to be no reservation under that name. We're fully committed this evening." Maya glanced past the hostess to the dining room beyond. Multiple tables sat empty, their white tablecloths pristine under the warm lighting. "I can see several available tables from here," Maya said, keeping her voice level despite the heat rising in her cheeks. She reached for her phone. "I have the confirmation email." Elise's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Those tables are reserved for our regular patrons who will be arriving shortly. Perhaps there was a miscommunication when the reservation was made." Maya displayed the confirmation email. "There's no miscommunication. The reservation is confirmed for tonight." Elise examined the email with reluctant attention before sighing. "It appears there's been a regrettable error in our system. Unfortunately, we still cannot accommodate you this evening. Perhaps another night would—" "Is there a problem here?" Victor Harrington approached, his silver hair and impeccable suit projecting authority. His eyes moved from Elise to Maya, assessing the situation with practiced efficiency. "This lady claims to have a reservation, but we have no availability," Elise explained. "I don't claim to have a reservation. I do have one," Maya clarified, her voice steady despite the familiar sensation of being made to feel like an outsider in spaces she had earned the right to occupy. Around them, other diners waiting in the lounge observed the interaction. Some averted their eyes, while others watched with thinly veiled interest in the unfolding drama that disrupted the carefully maintained atmosphere of exclusivity that Le Cristal cultivated. In that moment, Maya recognized the familiar pattern, the subtle but unmistakable practice of exclusion operating behind a veneer of politeness and regrettable errors. It was a reflection not of her worth, but of an establishment clinging to outdated notions of who belonged in their rarefied air. The air in Le Cristal seemed to thicken as Maya stood her ground at the hostess stand. Over Elise's shoulder, she observed an elderly white couple approach without a reservation and be promptly escorted to a table with effusive smiles and practiced deference. Something hardened in Maya's chest. "Excuse me," Maya said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "I couldn't help but notice that the couple was seated immediately without a reservation." Elise's smile tightened. "They're regular patrons. We always accommodate our loyal customers." "I see. And how does one become a regular patron? Is there a particular qualification I'm missing?" Maya kept her tone measured despite the familiar heat rising in her chest. Victor Harrington stepped closer, his cologne, something expensive and overpowering, invading Maya's space. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding," he said with practiced diplomacy that barely masked his condescension. Le Cristal caters to a particular clientele. You might find yourself more comfortable somewhere else. The words struck Maya with painful familiarity. How many times had she heard that same sentiment, phrased in different ways throughout her life? The security guard followed her through department stores while ignoring other shoppers. The real estate agent who steered her away from certain neighborhoods before James's name and financial status changed the conversation. The gallery owner who had assumed she was part of the cleaning staff rather than a potential curator. I'm perfectly comfortable here, Maya replied, noting how conversations at nearby tables had quieted, attention subtly turning toward the developing scene. What makes you think I wouldn't be? Victor's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. We cultivate a certain atmosphere at Le Cristal. Our regular patrons expect a particular experience. And my presence disrupts that atmosphere? Maya asked directly. I didn't say that, Victor replied, voice rising slightly. But your behavior is becoming difficult. Perhaps you misunderstood the type of establishment we run here. Maya felt the eyes of other diners upon her, some quickly glancing away when she met their gaze, others watching with undisguised interest. One older woman at a nearby table nodded subtly in apparent agreement with Victor. A younger couple looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, studying their menus with sudden intensity. A lifetime of choices flashed through Maya's mind. How many times had she swallowed her pride and walked away? How many times had she chosen peace over justice, comfort over confrontation? She remembered standing in a department store at 16, her mother calmly returning a security guard's suspicious gaze before guiding Maya out with her head held high. They want you to make a scene, her mother had explained later. They want to confirm their suspicions. Your dignity is your power. But her mother had also taught her that dignity sometimes meant standing your ground. Which lesson applied tonight? I understand exactly what type of establishment you're running, Maya said, her voice steady despite the tremor of anger she felt. And I also understand that I have a confirmed reservation. Victor's facade of politeness began to crack. Mrs. Richardson, Maya corrected. Mrs. Richardson, he continued with exaggerated patience. I've explained our situation. Now, you're creating a disturbance for our other guests. I must insist that you leave. From the corner of her eye, Maya noticed Marcus, a young waiter, watching the interaction with visible discomfort. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, clutching a stack of menus to his chest, conflict evident on his face. I'm speaking in a normal tone of voice, Maya pointed out. You're the one raising your voice, Mr. Harrington. Victor's jaw tightened. He turned to Elise. Call security. Elise reached for the phone with practiced efficiency that told Maya this wasn't the first time such a call had been made. Maya could leave now. She could walk out the door with the dignity her mother had taught her to maintain. James would understand. He'd experienced similar treatment before his wealth provided a shield of privilege that sometimes, but not always, deflected such interactions. They could find another restaurant, one where their presence wouldn't disrupt the atmosphere. But standing there, Maya thought of the exhibition she was curating. Works by black artists examining exactly these moments of exclusion, the subtle and not so subtle ways spaces were marked as belonging to some and not others. How could she champion those artists' courage while walking away from this moment? I'll wait for security to arrive, Maya said calmly. Then we can all discuss why a restaurant would refuse to honor a legitimate reservation. Victor's practiced smile vanished entirely. This is private property. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. On what grounds are you refusing me service? Maya asked, aware of the silence that had fallen over the nearby tables. Victor didn't answer directly. Your attitude is disrupting our other guests' dining experience. A security guard appeared at Maya's side, a tall man with a buzz cut and an earpiece. Is there a problem here? He asked, addressing Victor rather than Maya. This woman is creating a disturbance and needs to be escorted out, Victor said, authority ringing in his voice. The security guard turned to Maya. Ma'am, I'll need you to come with me. I have a reservation, Maya explained. They're refusing to honor it without providing a legitimate reason. We have every right to refuse service, Victor interjected, before the guard could respond. I understand, sir, the guard said with a nod. He turned back to Maya. Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave the premises. Maya felt every eye in the restaurant on her. The moment crystallized in her mind. Another story to tell, another indignity to process, another example of how spaces like this remained unwelcoming despite her accomplishments, her education, her social standing. I'll leave when you provide a legitimate reason for refusing to honor my reservation, she said firmly. The security guard sighed, clearly hoping for an easier resolution. Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. He placed his hand on Maya's elbow, the touch firm, but not quite forceful. The contact sent a jolt through Maya's body. The presumption that her physical autonomy could be overridden, that she could be touched and moved against her will. The Dio. Humiliation burned hot in her chest, mingling with a fury she rarely allowed herself to express. Remove your hand, she said, her voice steady but lower now. I have not given you permission to touch me. The guard hesitated, glancing at Victor, who nodded impatiently. Sir, Marcus suddenly spoke up, stepping forward with visible nervousness. There is a table available in my section. The Petersons cancelled their reservation 20 minutes ago. Victor turned a cold gaze on the young waiter. Stay out of this, Marcus. This is not your concern. But, sir, we do have the table, Marcus persisted, though his voice shook slightly. Return to your duties immediately, Victor snapped. The security. Guard's grip tightened slightly on Maya's arm. I said remove your hand, Maya repeated, louder this time. A few patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats. An older gentleman looked away, studying his wine glass with sudden interest. A woman whispered something to her companion, who shrugged slightly. No one intervened. The guard began to guide Maya toward the door, his grip firm despite her resistance. The humiliation washed over her in waves. She had dressed carefully for this evening, had succeeded in a world that constantly questioned her right to be there. And yet here she was, being physically removed from a restaurant while people watched. In silence, as they approached the door, Maya's phone chimed with an incoming text. With her free hand, she pulled it from her purse. James, just parking the car. Be there in 2 minutes. Can't wait to celebrate your exhibition. Maya looked up from the screen, a new resolve hardening within her. James would arrive to find her being ejected from the restaurant where they had planned to celebrate her professional triumph. Her humiliation would become his as well. But more importantly, this moment would become another scar they both carried, another story they told with resigned familiarity, another experience their future children would inherit as lessons in navigating a world that still, despite everything, saw their presence in certain spaces as an intrusion. My husband will be here momentarily, Maya said, her voice carrying through the now quiet restaurant. He made this reservation a week ago. His name is James Richardson. Something flickered across Victor's face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or recalculation. Richardson, he repeated, the name clearly registering some significance he hadn't connected until now. Yes, Maya confirmed, watching the recognition dawn. James Richardson of Richardson Technologies. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted perceptibly. The security guard's grip on Maya's arm loosened slightly as he glanced questioningly at Victor. The cool evening air hit Maya's face as the security guard escorted her through the restaurant's heavy glass doors. She maintained her composure despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Behind them, Victor Harrington supervised the removal with stern satisfaction, arms crossed over his expensive suit. A sleek, gunmetal gray Porsche 911 GT3 with custom detailing pulled up to the curb, its distinctive engine purring before falling, silent. The young valet's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Richardson's car! Hey, Tony, it's James Richardson!" he called to his colleague, rushing forward with unprecedented enthusiasm. Victor's posture changed subtly, his attention shifting from Maya to the vehicle. James emerged from the car, handing the keys to the eager valet. He wore a simple charcoal blazer over a black shirt, no tie, no flashy accessories, yet carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from knowing precisely who he was. His eyes immediately found Maya standing with the security guard, and his expression darkened with concern. "Maya, what's happening?" James asked, quickly moving to her side. The security guard's hand dropped from Maya's arm as if burned. "They wouldn't honor our reservation," Maya explained, her voice steady despite everything. "Mr. Harrington decided I wasn't the right fit for their establishment and had me removed." James's gaze moved from Maya to Victor, who had stepped forward. His entire demeanor transformed. Gone was the dismissive authority. In its place, an ingratiating smile spread across his face. "Mr. Richardson, what an unexpected pleasure," Victor said, extending his hand. "There seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding with your reservation." Inside the restaurant, faces appeared at the windows. A murmur spread among the patrons as recognition dawned. James Richardson, tech innovator, billionaire philanthropist, the man whose recent $50 million donation to the city's education initiative had been front-page news. James ignored Victor's outstretched hand. "I'd like to understand what kind of misunderstanding results in my wife being physically escorted from a restaurant where we had a confirmed reservation." Victor's smile faltered. "A regrettable error in our booking system, I assure you. We've been uncommonly busy this evening, and sometimes our staff can become overzealous in managing the crowds." "There was no crowd," Maya interjected calmly. "There were empty tables clearly visible. Other patrons were seated without reservations, while I was told no tables were available. When I pointed this out, Mr. Harrington suggested I would be more comfortable somewhere else, and called security." The security guard shifted uncomfortably, looking at his shoes. Mrs. Richardson became somewhat agitated, Victor attempted, his confidence visibly faltering. "I remained perfectly calm," Maya corrected. "You were the one who raised your voice, Mr. Harrington." A small crowd had gathered near the entrance. Restaurant staff, including Marcus, watched the confrontation with varying expressions of discomfort and vindication. Several patrons had followed. The spectacle outside, phones discreetly recording the interaction. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside," Victor suggested, glancing nervously at the growing audience. "We have a lovely table waiting for you both. Complimentary champagne, of course." James regarded Victor with a cool assessment. "I was impressed with Le Cristal when I dined here last month with my investment team. We discussed the possibility Of backing your expansion to downtown and the west side. Victor's face paled. I had no idea you were considering— That's rather the point, isn't it? James interrupted. You had no idea who my wife was when you decided she didn't belong in your restaurant. Marcus stepped forward, gathering his courage. Sir, I tried to tell Mr. Harrington that we had a table available. The Petersons canceled their reservation. He addressed Maya directly. I wanted to seat you, Mrs. Richardson. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Victor shot Marcus a withering glance before quickly composing himself. A misunderstanding that we can certainly rectify immediately. Your table awaits, and dinner will be entirely complimentary this evening. Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was vindication in watching Victor squirm, satisfaction in the reversal of power. Yet beneath it lay a deeper current of exhaustion and sadness. Her worth as a human being was still contingent on her proximity to wealth and status. Without James, she would have been just another black woman ushered away from spaces not meant for her. I'd prefer to dine elsewhere, Maya said quietly to James. Victor's desperation became palpable. Please, Mrs. Richardson, allow us to make this right. I personally apologize for any discomfort you experienced. Any discomfort? James repeated, his voice dangerously soft. My wife was physically removed from your establishment because you decided she didn't meet your criteria for acceptable patrons. That goes well beyond discomfort. Several onlookers nodded in agreement. A distinguished, older gentleman who had been dining inside stepped forward. I witnessed the entire interaction, he said. The treatment this lady received was shameful. I regret not speaking up sooner. He nodded respectfully to Maya before walking to his car. Victor watched another regular patron leave, panic crossing his features as he calculated the potential damage. Not just the lost investment opportunity, but the reputational harm spreading in real time as more phones recorded the scene. What would you like to do, Maya? James asked, taking her hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Maya looked at Victor, then at the restaurant behind him. The crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the faces watching from windows. She thought about the exhibition she was curating, about the artists whose work challenged precisely these structures of exclusion. She thought about her mother's lessons on dignity, about the choices between walking away and standing firm. This isn't about a dinner reservation, she said finally, addressing Victor directly. This is about a pattern of behavior that needs to be acknowledged before it can change. She turned to James, drawing strength from his unwavering support. In this moment, the decision was entirely hers, a small reclamation of power in a situation designed to strip it away. The weight of the choice pressed upon her, to walk away with dignity or to stay and demand the space she deserved. Either way, something fundamental had already shifted. Maya drew a deep breath, the weight of generations of similar moments informing her next words. We're staying, Maya announced, her voice quiet but resolute. Not for the dinner we planned, but because leaving solves nothing. James nodded, understanding immediately. Victor's relief was palpable but short-lived. I appreciate the offer of a table, Mr. Harrington, Maya continued. But what I'd prefer is a conversation, not just about what happened to me, but about what happens here regularly. Victor glanced nervously at the small crowd that had gathered, including several patrons with phones still recording. Perhaps we could speak privately in my office. I think this is appropriate, Maya replied. Discrimination thrives in private spaces. Change requires transparency. Marcus stepped forward. Mrs. Richardson is right. I've seen it happen before. Subtle suggestions that certain guests might be more comfortable elsewhere. Table availability. That changes depending on who's asking. An older woman who had been dining inside approached. "I've been coming here for 20 years, Victor. I noticed it too, but said nothing. I'm ashamed of that now." Victor's face flushed. Le Cristal has always maintained certain standards. Standards based on what exactly? Maya asked. Because from where I stand, those standards seem to have everything to do with appearance and assumptions, and very little to do with the content of someone's character. Several onlookers nodded in recognition of this truth. A young couple who had been seated near the hostess stand earlier stepped outside. "We're leaving," the woman announced, "and we won't be back until we know this establishment treats all its patrons with equal respect." Victor watched them go, the implications of the evening's events becoming increasingly clear as whispers and phone cameras documented his humiliation. "Your table is ready whenever you'd like it," he said quietly to Maya and James. 3 weeks later, Maya scrolled through a local news article on her tablet. Upscale restaurant faces reckoning after discrimination incident goes viral. The piece detailed how Le Cristal had become the catalyst for a broader conversation about exclusionary practices in the city's high-end establishments. Several restaurants had publicly announced reviews of their seating policies. Reservation systems were being audited for fairness. Staff training programs on unconscious bias were being implemented. James entered their home office with 2 cups of coffee. "Victor called again," he said, placing a mug beside Maya. "He wants to meet." "About implementing those changes we discussed after the incident, rather than pursuing legal action or simply leveraging their social media platform to denounce Le Cristal. Maya and James had proposed a partnership. The Richardson Foundation would fund bias training for the entire staff and establish a scholarship program for minority students interested in culinary arts and restaurant management, with guaranteed internships at Le Cristal. "I'll meet with him next week," Maya said. "His initial defensiveness seems to be evolving into something resembling reflection. Amazing what a 30% drop in reservations can do for moral development," James remarked dryly. Maya sighed. "That's what troubles me most. It took economic pressure to create change. It took your name and our foundation's influence to make him listen." "True," James acknowledged. "But you're using that influence to create change that extends beyond us. That matters." 6 months later, Maya stood in the gallery space where her exhibition, Reflections on Belonging, had opened to critical acclaim. The final section of the exhibition featured a collaborative installation created by young artists of color she had been mentoring. "The hardest part was believing I belonged in spaces like this," said Tiana, a promising sculptor whose work explored themes of identity and exclusion. "Every time I walk into a gallery or a restaurant and get that look, I second-guess myself." Maya nodded in understanding. "That feeling may never completely disappear. But remember that your presence in these spaces isn't just about you. It's about transforming the spaces themselves. When you insist on your right to be there, you make it easier for those who come after you." She glanced around the gallery, now filled with diverse patrons admiring the artwork. Among them, she spotted Marcus, who had left Le Cristal to join the Richardson Foundation's Hospitality Equity Initiative. Nearby, surprisingly, stood Victor Harrington, quietly observing a powerful installation piece about invisible barriers. The restaurant owner caught Maya's eye and nodded respectfully, not with the desperate deference of someone seeking approval, but with the sobered acknowledgement of someone confronting uncomfortable truths. Maya returned the nod, then turned back to her students. The work of transformation was ongoing, existing in these small moments of recognition, in the gradual reshaping of spaces and minds. It was imperfect and often frustratingly slow, but tonight, surrounded by art that challenged and conversations that mattered, Maya could see the reflections of change beginning to take form.